Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Neon. I am not here with Geeky Sparkles, but she's here in spirit. Woohoo! Woohoo! There she is. We're gonna talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and it's kind of interesting. She kicked over a story this morning that they are merging the monster manuals, for the 5e version of Dungeons and Dragons, or is this the 6e version? I don't know what we're dealing with now, but Morgan Kanan is going to present the monsters of the multiverse, and we're going to talk about this because there is a desire for Dungeons and Dragons, but in name only, right? We don't want the creators of Dungeons and Dragons being associated with D&D anymore. It's become very much a glammed up celebrity thing, and I don't play 5e. I tried playing 5e with the kids. I noped out and played switched to an OSR, which I'm not going to name because the guy who developed the OSR was angry that I name checked him in a video a couple of years ago, which was nuts because I had nothing but good things to say about the system. But I digress. We're going to talk about this because it does seem like D&D doesn't know what it wants to be. Does it want to pander to old heads with nostalgia, but bastardized versions of nostalgic D&D with like Dragonlance and Forgotten Realms and all that stuff, or does it want to cater to this new audience? The audience I'm talking about, the audience that hangs out on Twitter, or the audience that was introduced to D&D through Critical Role and Felicia Day and all these celebrity gamers. And I think the answer is yes, they're trying to have their cake and eat it too, but I think they're going to have to kind of pick a side here pretty soon, because I think either D&D is going to fall to the wokeness, which I think it already has, or they're going to try to win back some of the old heads. I don't know. I mean, it was very popular during the pandemic. I don't know if the sales of D&D are going to continue, if it's going to continue to have mainstream success or mainstream notoriety. I mean, D&D kind of laid low for years. It was very big in the 80s and early 90s, and then it sort of fell off a cliff and the general public forgot about it. And then we had, Critical Role, Felicia Day and her group, and then, of course, Stranger Things. And we'll talk a little bit about Stranger Things 4. They're going to focus on D&D with this guy who looks like he was on tour with Rush or something. Playing D&D, but this is kind of what it was like back in the day. We had guys that looked like this playing, and they're definitely on the Venn diagram of metalheads and D&D players. We had some people that crossed over, so we're gonna talk about this. Before we get into it any further, please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. Over 267,000 subs. Thank you for the support. Greatly appreciated. Geeky is not here, so I'll give another woohoo. Woohoo. I need a button or something. I need a button. Anyway, what kicked this off was that D&D Beyond is delisting 2 monster manuals, merging them into the Monsters of the Multiverse. And I have to wonder if we're eventually going to phase out Morgan Kanan, who was a creation of Gary Gygax's, because there has been this concerted effort, lately to point out all of the problematic lore, associated with Dungeons and Dragons, to call out Gary Gygax, as being problematic. I mean, several message boards, several articles written over the last couple of years that Gary Gygax is problematic, that D&D is problematic, and it's interesting. They're trying to bank on nostalgia, and they're bringing back brands like Dragonlance and Spelljammer and all of that, but they're not letting the original creators of those worlds know that they're bringing them back. Apparently Margaret Wise and Tracy Hickman, I did a video on this, didn't even know that Dragonlance was coming back. So they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. Like, we're going to bring back this popular brand to try to get the old heads to spend money with us again, but we're not going to include the problematic people associated with these things. If they could scrape Gary Gygax and the Gygax name off the bottom of their shoes over at Wizards, I swear to God, they would do it. I really think they would do it. There's a new Dungeons and Dragons feature documentary called Role Players in the Works at XTR, and this was announced a couple of days ago. And they talk about all the celebrities they're going to interview about Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm like, you do realize that most of the people who worked on D&D in the 70s and 80s, a lot of them are still alive, right? A lot of the people who created these beloved campaign worlds are still alive. You could interview them. Gary Gygax Jr. is very much alive. You can interview him. Just be very careful if you interview him, because Twitter's going to come for you and they're going to put words into his mouth. But these people are very much alive and well, and some of them don't have very good feelings toward Wizards, I think, at this point, because they've either been kind of ignored, blacklisted, shunned in other ways. And again, when you're bringing back your campaign worlds and you're not asking the creators of those worlds to get involved, you might not have a legal obligation to do so, but I think you kind of have a moral obligation, wouldn't you? Like, hey, Margaret Wise, Tracy Hickman, still around. Jeff Grubb, still around. Anyway, I'm going to read this. XTR has launched production on Role Players, which is billed as the definitive documentary on the seminal fantasy game Dungeons and Dragons. Definitely wasn't seminal, because a lot of people who played the game didn't get any. Boasting never before seen archive footage and interviews with high-profile celebrity D&D fanatics, Role Players will tell the all-encompassing story of Dungeons and Dragons, from the game's origin story to the cult-like devotion of its players. Are they going to mention the Twitter cancellation mobs? Exploring the power living in a fantasy world can have on real-life human connection. Maybe that's where Getting Some comes into it. The feature is being made by director Morgan John Fox, The One You Never Forget, and producer Ted Speaker, Sword of Trust, Bryn Mooser, Catherine Everett, and Justin Lacob. Avizar Kamaya, executive producing. Pick comes on the heels of Paramount and E1's announcement on the title for their upcoming narrative feature, Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves, and Hasbro's reported explosive growth on the franchise as a result of the major theatrical release in March of 2023. Paramount has no, and Hasbro have no involvement in the XTR film. Through its wildly different levels, times, adventures, and possibilities, D&D created its own universe and community, said the head of development, Justin Lacob, capturing the imagination of gamers, misfits, geniuses, rebels, and it had a lasting impact on culture and our lives outside the game. As a director, I'm excited to tell the story of D&D, which at its heart is about the true power of learning to work as teams, consuming and creating inclusive narratives. There it is, guys. There's nothing more exciting than a legendary game that rose to fame with a little help from the era of the Satanic Panic, which is happening again with D&D, by the way. We're going through it again. Now, I mean, look at this. This is coming from Screen Rant. Look at all the problematic stuff in D&D. Problematic races, problematic monsters, orcs or black people. What the hell is going on? And, speaking of Screen Rant, they had this other article out there a couple of days ago talking about how Dungeons and Dragons and Star Wars are problematic because they're beholden to the old audiences. And the old audiences expect certain things to go a certain way. And they get very, very nasty when things don't go their way, according to this author. And here's the thing. If you want a completely different game, just create a completely different game. We had GURPS. We had all kinds of alternatives to D&D back in the day. We still do. But the brand D&D has become synonymous with fantasy role-playing. So, of course, they're gonna use that. So Stranger Things Season 4 sees Dungeons & Dragons Club and lots of marketing opportunities. So we're going back to D&D. Stranger Things, which was kind of somewhat responsible for putting D&D back on the map for the normies. I mean, we had these, celebrities like, Felicia Day and of course, Critical Role, that Will Wheaton, etc. Hollywood nerds who kind of helped popularize it on the internet. But the general public was made aware that D&D was still a thing through Stranger Things. So I guarantee you there's going to be all kinds of product placement. I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to see where D&D goes from here, though, because I think they're kind of at a fork in the road. I don't know if they're going to continue to do as well as they have done, because I know a lot of old heads are getting kind of burnt out on a lot of the random changes and, of course, the political correctness, the wokeness. moving on to other systems. But I don't know. I think it's going to be revisionist history. I think we're going to see Hasbro try to distance itself from the Gygaxes and from the people that actually made the game. Wouldn't surprise me at all. That seems to be par from the course now, doesn't it? I mean, I'm kind of surprised Disney hasn't just scraped Walt Disney off the bottom of their shoes too, because of his political leanings. But I'm sure there are some people in the company that would love that. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. More of the same. Not interested in modern incarnations of D&D. I really am not, and I'm definitely not interested in the scene anymore. I was, but I have seen too much. I have seen too much of the culture around the new breed of D&D players, and I've been disgusted by it. The cancellation and all of this bullshit that goes on Twitter. And yeah, I don't want to be a part of that. So you can have it. I guess I'll just go back to playing 2nd edition. I don't know. I'm going to wrap this up. Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. We'll talk later.